Let's get started. You go.
So you start the Mishnah.
Yeah, we can do the Mishnah. All right. Good morning, everybody. First of all, today's shir should be Le'ilu Nishmas Bela Esther Bas Harav Avram. Some Leah marks which one? Maternal grandmother. So Shamash Leah. Second, what's today? Second day of Nisan. All right. Mishnah says, look, the Mishnah, we saw this yesterday.
What page?
Page Nun Testament base. Nazir today's Daf Samach. So Nazir Shaya Tameh Besapek Muchla Besapek. So you got a guy who's a Nazir, and he also might have been a Tameh. Let's say he might have touched something, he might have not, unsure. And somebody who's also a Muchla, perhaps there was two people. One of the situations, two people went to a Kohen. One of them was confirmed Saras. And then the I guess the spots or so went away. We don't know which one. Was he the one who was completely tahor, or was he the one who was muchlat? Eichel bekachim achar shishim yom. He can go ahead and partake of kachim after 60 days because he needs at least for tuba. He needs at least 7 days, right? His lack of karbanos doesn't affect him as long as he sprinkles on day 3 and 7. He gets rid of that tuba issue. Okay. In regards to Matzera, right? You need the 60 days. In other words, you need why? Because you need to do 2 shavings, right? One in the beginning and then 7 days later. Over here, you can't go ahead and shave immediately by Matzora because perhaps the guy was a Nazir to begin with, and therefore all he needs is 30 days. Not a Matzora, not Tameh, and just needs 30 days. So you can't shave for the initial 30 days. Okay, so you got shave 30 days. That's your first shave. Maybe your second shaving would be 37 days. No. What's the issue? The issue is that perhaps he was he was never a Matzera, right? Mm-hmm. He was just Tameh. So he already does one shaving, and now he's a Nazir. So he's 30 days. So he can't do a second shaving until after day 60. So therefore, regarding eating kachim, now we took care of both the Matzora issue because he waited 2 shavings, right? And we'll soon see when he brings his karbanos. So he does 2 shavings so he can eat kachim, right? And also he took care of his tuba issue because we said he sprinkled on days 1 through 7. Okay, now, but however, that's only eating kachim. In order for him to go ahead and be, if he wants to go ahead and basically be done with Naziris, he's 120 days. Why is that? Because perhaps he was just a Matzora. You need 60 days for that, as we just pointed out. And then maybe he was never Tameh, he was Torah, so you need at least 90 days. Okay, now, but perhaps he was also Tameh, so therefore you need 60 days for that. Now, Safek, you might be Tameh, so you can't just shave in 7 days because maybe he was not Tameh. So therefore, when's your first shaving for a Tameh? Only after 90 days. And then after 90 days, you already took care of the doubt whether you're Matzora. You already took care of the doubt whether you were Tameh. And now, days 91 through 120, he is his Nazirus. And therefore, 120 days. If we know in a case of what, if you
he's only suffering.
He's suffering both in this case.
He's suffering both.
The first words of the Mishnah, yeah. He's Tameh b'suffik or Muchla b'suffik.
Why does he? Why would he? Why would he shave?
What do you mean? He has to remove the hair
for the suffix Muchla.
So it's to remove his hair. Yes, he has to. He has
but
to.
He's only a suffix. He doesn't remove all of his hair.
He removes all. In this case, he removes all of his hair, as we saw in the previous cases, right? When we dealt with that case, they're removing all the hair. So the Mishnah holds, right, that the one does go ahead and remove all the hair for the possibility that he was a Mitzvah. The only time the shaving of a Mitzvah is deicha his Nazirus if he's a Vadai of his Manshu Safek, but a person's only a Safek, ain't a deicha. Then he doesn't deicha, and that's the reason why.
Right. That's what it was.
That's the Mishnah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you're asking something else. This is
No, that's what I meant.
So that's why he says that's why each time he shaves, he can't just shave 7 days later because he might be a Nazir. If he's a Nazir, he can't override his Nazirus, right? That's what he says. So the Mishnah. So your premise was not correct because he never overrides the Nazirus. Only a 30-day Nazirus. Fine. Zok the Gemara. Let's see the Gemara now. Tanya, we learned the Mishnah. But Medvar, we also saw this earlier. Benazir, what this? Right? This all these rules that we just created. That remember, first you got to take care of the suffix of the Mitzayra, and then he also might be that if he was let's say Mitzayra and Tameh, right? First you get rid of the Tzaras, then you take care of the Tuma, and then you do your Nazirus. But all of these, you can't do your shavings until you wait a full period of your Nazirus. Right, as Mishnah said, because you can't shave out of suffix, right? So therefore, why is it day 30, 60, 90, 120 Nazirus Mu'atis? Because we're talking about Nazirus of 120 of 30 days. About Nazirus Bashan. Let's say, for example, the guy says I'm a Nazir for a year. Then we're going to use the same rules, right? Because basically the time, the 30 days went from 7 to 30 because of the shaving, right? Those now the what's it called? The periods of time in between, right, are instead of being 30 days, let's say if the Bashana was for 1 year, then then he would only be able to after 2 periods, right, which would be 2 years. Now, each shaving, instead of being 7 days apart, right, they're not 30 days either because his Nazir is a year, so you have to be something that he might be a Nazir now. Therefore, each shaving takes place a year later. Therefore, you'd only be able to go out and eat kachim after 2 full years. And then also to go ahead and say, okay, we know you've taken care of every suffix that would only occur after the 4th year. Fine. Mitzvah shape removes all his hair.
Right.
Body hair.
So you're Nazir that they got Mitzvah, now you're shaving.
So the Gemara is going to question later on, maybe it can count for both. We'll soon see. We'll see why it can't count for both. Now, the Tanya law. So we've just only Mishnah until now we've only discussed shaving, but there's something else that's left out. There's karbanos, right? Wait, you got to bring karbanos, right? You can't just end your mitzvah, you just shave twice and done with that. You got to bring karbanos, you got to bring your chatas, you got to bring your usher, right? The Tanya law umagaleach and the tigalachas, and now for the first shaving is tigalachas rishayna. Now the first shaving. There are 3 possibilities. After 30 days, he might have just been a nazir. He might have just ended his mitzvah muchlat before his days of counting between shavings, right? Or he might have just finished he just might have just been tamei. So he has 3 possibilities. So tiglachas rishayna, maybe tzipor, he goes ahead and he brings where there's a bird offering that's done in the beginning of the first shaving by mitzvah. A guy has tzaras. They say, okay, you have tzaras muchlat. Now your tzaras is ended. You could stop, right? So what do? You bring 2, you shave, and you bring 2 bird offering. You bring 2 birds. One of them is shechted, the other one is dipped into the other, right? And then the blood from it is dipped in and sprinkled in, right? So that's done on day 1, by the first shaving. So you bring those tziparim, which are brought not inside the mikdash, so it's not an issue. It's not an issue. The chatas oif, and then you can bring a chatas oif. Now, normally one cannot bring a chatas out of a suffix, but a bird offering. One can do as long as it's not eaten. Okay, so he can bring the chatas oath for the purposes of that that he might have be just never a mitzvah, but just tamei. And now you got to bring your
But the entire carbon is burned with a chatas oath.
No, some of it is right, a bit fura, right?
Yeah.
So now the chatas oath. And he might have just been tamei, never a tzara, so therefore he has to bring a chatas. Now the chatas oath, and the olos behema, and so that would take care of the issue of tamei, right? When I say tamei, meaning a nazir becomes tamei, right? One who's normally tamei doesn't bring korban. Just when I say tamei, being a nazir, just tamei. The olos behema, or maybe he was never a mitzvah, maybe he was never a tamei, and therefore he was a perfectly good. Therefore he brings the oilas behem. Now, shnia, and then they actually have a brisa which will explain a little better. We'll soon see. Shnia by the second shaving maybe chatas oif. So now we already took care of the first part of the mitzvah. So he has to bring chatas oif because what happened? He might need to go ahead and his tzaras, and the tzaras being a chatas at the end, right? Chatas is really a chatas behema, not a chatas oath, right? Where you bring at the end of at the end of 7 days of by Matzora. However, a person, we cannot bring a chatas behema out because of a suffix. So what do you do here? So a person goes out and basically declares, right? All his possessions ownerless, right? It's one of those karbanos that he could bring as a poor person, could bring bird offerings. So therefore, he brings a bird chatas for his chatas oath, and then after concluding the second one, he could have just finished his nazirus. Why? Maybe he was never a Mitzayra. He was just Tameh. So therefore, the first 30 days were his Tuma. The second 30 days were his nazirus. And therefore, he brings an Oila because, and then basically his Ola is conditional, right? If this is my Ola, it's my obligation. And if it didn't occur as I was Tameh and now I'm Tahor without Saras, then this would be my obligation to bring an oila. And shlishis, maybe chatas ha'of, and that after the third shaving, he would go ahead and bring a chatas ha'of for the possibility that maybe he was a Mitzayra. Right, maybe he was a Mitzayra. And now after 90 days, right, he could have been Tameh. So therefore, this is my chatas ha'of for that. And v'oilas behema, or he was a Mitzayra, and he was never Tameh, and therefore he brings the oilas behema to have this naziris. Well, that's the chatasov. That's the chatasov is for that. Right. And v'olas behema is for if he was tahor. Right. And revis, and the fourth one is if he was both a Mitzayra and Tameh, then after the fourth one, he may be carbon tahara. He brings a carbon tahara, which is all three. And we'll soon see that all three, that even though for the other ones, right, he also at the conclusion, he had to bring, in addition, he has to bring his asham and his shlamim, right? Chatas and his shlamim. Chatas and his shlamim. Right?
Right. No, Asham Shami.
No, I think Asham. No, Chatas is brought in, I think. Right?
To complete
Nazir Tara. So he brings all three of those at the end, even though, let's say he was never either one of them. And his Ola was earlier. So nevertheless, the Shlamim and all those can be brought 90 days later from day 30 to day 120.
You bring in another Ola.
Right, and he brings another Ola because if I was obligated before, that was my obligation. Now, yes. Now,
and he also waits with the chatas.
We just said which one. When he has to bring it, then he brings to get the next step. Then he never brings the chatas because of suffix. If it gets to a suffix, then it's the chatas ha'of. It's only a situation where you're allowed to. Now, let's see the Gemara. Now, Amart, we say Tiglachas Rishon maybe Vichulis. Now we just said the case. Now Gemara's gonna explain the Madav Shach. Okay, we don't need your explanation. Let's see the Gemara. Madav Shach. Shapi Kamaisi. Right? It's good they brought. Di Vada Mitzayrahu V'Lav Tamehu. If he was a Mitzayra and not Tameh, right? So it's Tzipar Chabasa. Therefore, the two birds that he brought, the Bishach, one of them, that was his obligation because that's what you do after the first shaving of a Mitzayra. The chatas of suffix and the chatas of which is brought just in case I was Tameh, but really we don't need it anymore. Then azla the kfura, that goes the kfura, that is not eaten at all. The oila having the dava, and therefore the oil was in the dava. And then to go ahead and shave within 7 days, because perhaps you can't say, okay, shave, wait 30 days because maybe it was never a Mitzayra. Now shave day 30 and day 37. You can't go ahead and do that. Or shave in the beginning, right? Right? It says over there you can't go ahead and bring a razor upon your head if you're a Nazir. Now, the ilav mitzayra vaday. Now, if he was never a mitzayra, have even tameh, and he was just tameh. So therefore, chatas ha'oif chavas. So the chatas ha'oif is brought as chiv because the chatas ha'oif is brought because as if one is tameh, right? A Nazir tameh. That sipar and I, the birds that were brought in case he was a mitzayra. How do you do that? Abrai comes up, and those are brought on the outside, not inside the mikdash. Therefore, it's not a problem of shechting inside, right? V'loy havi chulin. Therefore, it's not chulin b'yatzara. The olas behema, the ola in the end, havi nedava. It was brought with the stipulation, conditional, and therefore, since it wasn't obligatory, therefore it could be a nedava. Now, the ilav mitzarahu v'lav tamehu, and if he was nothing, he was not a mitzara, and he was not tamehu. Tzipon avrai come up, and then he's basically all. The birds that he brought for Mitzaras, which were unnecessary because he was never Mitzayra, those are brought on the outside, no issue. Mm-hmm. And Chatas Ha'oif, the Chatas Ha'oif that was brought in case he was Tameh, which he wasn't, those were Kvura. And the Olas Behema Habi Chobas, and the Olas Behema was obligatory, and therefore that was his chiyuv to end his Nazirus. I have a boy Asham, but don't you need the Matzah? Doesn't he need to bring an Asham? The answer is Rabbi Shimon to Amar Maisi Umasni, that he could bring an Asham, right? And conditional, and do the same stipulation. If I'm obligated to bring the Asham now, then this is my chiyuv. If not, it's then it's an adava. Umasni.
How can you bring a Asham as a Ludava?
That's Rabbi Shimon. He to Amar Maisi. He's allowed to go ahead and make it. Then he can make it. Basically, it's either is my obligatory asham, or it's a shlamim that is a that's what's it called? Conditional. Rabbanim don't hold that. They didn't say it brings an asham. So that's right. So that's the sheet of Rabbi Shimon here, right? Where's Rabbi Shimon here? Right. There's
really
right.
strong.
Yeah. So there was said over here. There's the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. Now.
Right, we went through that.
Umasni, and then right away is condition. Now, Tegalaka Shnia. Now, regarding Tegalaka Shnia Vishlishis, so the second and third shavings. So Tzipor Light Sarach, you don't need the Tzipor because you only need that after the first shaving of Mitzarah. So by shavings number 2 and 3, we don't even need to discuss the birds, right? The Avik, because that was already done. So Maika, so wait, what are you going to say now? Okay, so Dilma Vada Muflad who? So maybe he was a Muflad, and therefore this is the ending. So Chada Safek, right? So therefore, in this case, we'd say Chada Safek Asipara. So therefore, we can say in this case that either one is for a for the suffix that he was counting. In other words, it's the end of his Nazirus. Chada Safek Tumaso, or right, it was a Safek Tumaso. So, and therefore, and those are brought, as we explained. And Tagachas Ravis, and the Taz Ravis may be Karban Tahira Masi. Then he brings the last sets of Karbanas that brought after the Ziz Tahira, and he stipulates that, if the other one was, only a voluntary, then this is my obligation. And if the other one was my obligation, then this one's only voluntary. But then the other Karbanas, the Shlamim and his Chatas, would count towards the previous. Now, the Vadai Nazir. And if he was a Vadai Nazir, right, for all these, right, then Ayla Rishayna Chayva, then the Ayla Rishayna, the first one that was brought after the 30 days was his Chayva Vizayda Dava, and there was in Dava. Vim Tamei Mukhladhu, right? And if he was a Tamei, right, Mukhladhu, then Ayla Harishayna and the Dava, right, Vizachava. Then the first one was brought as an Adava, and this one is a Chiyuv, Vizah Shakabana, and this was the rest of his Karbanos. Now, we explained the Karbanos part. Now, let's go on. Tamei the Safek, Tamei Safek, Umuchlad Vada. Now, we discussed over here a situation of where one was, obviously a Nazir. He might have been a Metzaira, he might have been Tamei. Now, what about this case? Tamei Safek, Umuchlad Vada. He's for sure Tamei.
No, it's Safek.
Thank you.
He's
for sure a muchlat, right?
Oh.
Right. He's muchlat vada, right? Makra. So in terms of mitzvah, he was for sure tzaras. We don't know if he came tamei or not, and he's a nazir. So Eichel bekachim la'achar shmeina yamim. So he can go ahead and partake of kachim after 8 days. Let's see why. So he's certainly has tzaras, right? A Mitzvah, right? If a Nazir is a Mitzvah, he's allowed to shave. So we know for sure he could shave immediately, right? So therefore, he can go ahead and shave, right? Is a right 1 and 7, right? But then he has to go 37 days in order to go ahead and end it. Why? 67. I'm all over the place. I'm like thinking of the next thing, what my brain is processing without processing what I just read. Now, so why is this case? Why 67? Because like this, he's Vadai Mitzvah. But here's the issue, right? If he was a Mitzvah, now if one was just a Mitzvah and what's it called? A Mitzvah and a Nazir. Right, and nothing to do with Tumah. And nothing to do with Tumah. It'll be 37 days. He goes 7 days. Day 8, he starts his counting, and then he goes 37 days. The issue is over here.
Beginning of
he took care. 1 second. He took care of the 7 days. Now he might be tamei, he might not be. So therefore, you gotta wait 30 days, right? Before you go ahead and shave, because you're suffering tummy, right? And then you shave it then, and then you do another 30 days just in case your tummy. So therefore, it's a total of 67 days. Yeah.
So when he goes to the Kohen to find out whether he's in Sora, he should tell the Kohen, say I am in Sora rather than Sora.
Yeah. Well, you're right. So I mean, well, the Kohen doesn't rule, right? The Kohen doesn't rule that he's a suffix, right? Because I mean, he'll just in Muska, they'll confine it for another 7 days, right? Then he has to wait another 7 days, right? The issue is, let's say you have two people that went to a Kohen, and the Kohen ruled, okay, you're definitely a Mitzvah and you're not, and they forget, everyone involved forgot who was the one who was the Mitzvah. So one of them is a Vadai, one of them is not, right?
This mission is only on one person.
This, right. But regarding that person, he was the one. I might have been a Vada, a Mitzvah, or I might have not been already. I never took care of it, and whatever it is, I forgot. Yeah,
because of the second person.
right. Because the second person caused them to be in such a suffix. Right.
This was a mention
Right.
people that they started with.
Right.
No other way to make it something.
Right. Yeah.
Either a Muska or a Mikvah.
So that was one case. That was if he's definitely Saras, and we're unsure if he was tummy. Now let's do the opposite. Muchlat Safek, if he might have been a Mitzayra, the Tummy Vada, but we know certainly you are tummy. Eichel Kachim Liachar Shleishim L'Shiva Yamim. Is he eats after 37 days. Why?
Because he
he can't, right. Why is that? Because if he was because he was Vadai Tame, and therefore, right?
Days.
So therefore, it's normally 7 days. A person able to eat kachim, right? But over here, he might require 2 shavings, but you can't do the second shaving until after the 30 days.
Right.
Okay, so therefore, the 7 plus the 30.
Which you
right?
posed.
And now, what's your question? Why don't you shave on day 1? Right? Well, you can't shave on day 1 because if he was tame, then you have to have 7 days of growth, right? In order to go ahead, and he has to grow out, right? In order to go ahead and shave. In other words, you have to wait 7 days for a tame, right? After 7 days, he shaves on the 7 days, so you need 7 days of growth. So you can't just shave immediately days 1 and day 7 for your tsaras. So therefore, when your first shaving comes on day 7, the second shaving can only be on day 37 because he might not have tsaras, and therefore he has 37 days. Therefore, 37 days for kachim. And also and that is for 74 days. Why? Because after 34 days, so maybe he was a Mitzvah, he already did 37 days, but now he got to wait 7 days because he was Tameh. So count another 7 days from 37 is day 44, and then count 30 days for Nazirus. Therefore, 44 plus 30 is 74. Fine. Now, easy case. Tameh Vadai Muchad Vadai. He was both. Go ahead, you can shave immediately. Shave day 1 because you're Mitzvah, then day 7, right? Day 8, then you go ahead and eat on day 8. Your kachim. The shaisa yam talamezim liachar arba'im va'arba yom. Then wait. Then it's only 44 days. Why? Because you wait 7 days. Then you wait another 7 days for your nazirus. Your hair to grow. Remove that. You're at day 14. Count 30 days, and now you're at day 44. All right. So far, so good. All right. Now a little more complication. Ramos getting there. So Shalu Talmida b'Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. So they asked him Nazir Tahor u'Mitzayra. Can you have one shaving count towards both? So you can't do that. We'll soon see why. So Lama, so he said, well, why not? Why not, Rebbe? So if the purpose of each shaving was to grow out the hair, now you remove the hair in order to grow it, right? Or each one to remove. We'll soon get into this, right? Then then you guys are saying good. However, at the end of Nazirus, right? The end of Nazirus, this point is to go ahead and remove, right? But the Mitzvah's first shaving, right, is ordered to go ahead and grow it out, right? You got to grow it for the next 7 days. So they're not the same. Okay, so yours is fine. Okay, so when you're talking about the first shaving, because you shave the mitzvah for the purpose of growing it out, okay, fine. So ignore that first shaving. What about the second shaving? Why don't we do with that passage? The second shaving is to remove, and the end of your Nazirus is also to remove, right? But Tali Sipra, right? So if we said that this each one, right, was in order for this to for them to be for them to remove the hair, right? Then you're right. In other words, each one is before, right, the Zrikas Dam. Ella Mitzayra Lifnei Zrikas Dam. When it comes to Mitzayra, you go ahead and shave before you bring the carbon. The Nazir Liachar Zrikas Dam, but a Nazir is after the Zrikas Dam. So therefore, it's not the same, right? They're not both technically before. So, whereas the V'lei Tavli made Sarasa and Nazirasa, right? And therefore, it can't count as both for the is Naziris and his Saras. So Vitali made Sarasa V'tumasa, right? So that's okay. However, when it's talking about, right, his to be Matayirim at the end of his Naziris, right? But what about Saras and the shaving for if he becomes Tameh? Those are both for the same purpose. So if they both, go to the mikvah before or after the shaving, then you guys have said good. Ella Tameh, but one who is Nazir Tameh, le'achar biasmayim, he shaves only after he goes to the mikvah. U'matzayra lifnei biasmayim. The Matzayra shaves first before biasmayim. Okay, why can't you do both? It just shows that there are different types of shaving. So therefore, there's different qualities. One quality is the shaving for the removal or for the growth of hair. Is it done before or after the Kabbalah abroad? And is it done before or after the mikvah? Fine. Amrlo. So Amrlo, Yafem Sifra, right? So okay, fine, that makes sense. How is it shouldn't count for his days of counting, i.e., the second shave of Mitzayra, Zirasa. So what about the first shaving of Mitzayra and the other shaving of Tuma? The Zelegada was Zelegada. So each one is for growing out. So now this is basically another version of what we just said. And maybe those two are both for growing out. So Nazir, right? So he's so Zelegada was Zelegada. So who am I land? So Nazir Tar. So let's go back to the rules. Nazir Tahor v'Mitzayra. So if he's the Nazir Tahor at the end of his Nazirus and the Mitzayra is the God of Zelaver, and that wants to remove there and that wants to grow there, right? And the grow there is Mitzayra. The Nazir Tameh v'Hu Mitzayra. And if he was a Nazir Tameh, which is to remove the hair v'Hu Mitzayra, and he's Mitzayra Zelifnei Biasmai, Zeliachar Biasmai, right? As we just said earlier, they different times in the Mechva. And Tani, Reb Chia said, we'll just go ahead and finish the Perek Mitzvah, right? The Tani, Reb Chia, Zelifnei Biasmayim, right? The Zeliachar Biasmayim. There are different times. Zelifnei Zikasam, Zeliachar Zikasam. Each one is before the sprinkling, each was after this. Now, Shtiklachas a nega, we say that the shaving of the nega can only come as a vade, a suffix. So, boyrim rechama, sahani about tikalacha is the kamar mishum mitzvah mishum averiseir. Is it just for the mitzvah you have to use a razor, or is it the removal of the hair? So tuma, so we say l'mayna imishul averiseir. So we say in this case, so imishul averiseir tuma, or because it remove the hair of the tuma. So l'mayna nafkamina, what's the nafkamina? Lavuri benasho, to go ahead and use some sort of cream to go ahead and remove it. If he says because the mitzvah you have to use a razor, then he can't use that. I don't say it's remove the hair, then afilu sakya nasha nami. Go ahead and smear with the cream. So I mean the whole question doesn't really make sense because if we're talking about tikalachas, some have a problem with this girsa, and so Rava says tashmak listen galech abba tikalachas. Right, you have to go ahead and shave four. Now, if it's just removing the hair, seir tuma, afilu b'shlosh nami. Maybe that third and fourth can be combined. Why? Because the third and fourth, right? Even though he might be tameh, he might have been tahor, right? Which would take care of both. Maybe you can say that he removed the hair once after day 30 and not day 40, right? It says he has to do the kalachas. So sagile, maybe that will be enough. So shmamina mishum mitzvah shmamina, but the fact says you need four, so therefore you always need to go ahead and it's a mitzvah to go ahead and shave it each and every time. You can't just use previous times. So therefore shmamina and dealer from here that it is a mitzvah. So hajrach nei nazirim. We'll stop here. Well,